Hi, everyone, and welcome to my final project for CSCI E-90. My name is Danielle Lacherno. So today I'm going to kind of show you how to use different AWS services to take data, transform it, and then visualize it for presentations through AWS QuickSight. Initially, what I wanted to do was take a rapid API data set based on tennis results and go through Amazon Kinesis, AWS Lambda, and then transform it using AWS QuickSight to show a website or different betting needs for tennis. But once I had subscribed to that data, unfortunately, most of it was invalid, missing a lot of information and was unusable. So when I chose my new data set, I had to switch the AWS services that I was originally going to use. So because the data wouldn't be real-time data, whereas like a tennis match, you'd have new games, new points, kind of adjusting the information and the odds that we'd be receiving. For that instance, we'd want to use Kinesis or DynamoDB, but because the new data set that I chose to use was a bit more pre-planned and static, it felt like it made more sense to ingest the data into an S3 bucket, transform it using AWS Glue DataBrew, and then visualizing it through AWS QuickSight. So I'll show you kind of the steps that we had to take to set up this project. So first I went to AWS Data Exchange. We explore the product catalog, and because I want it to be somewhat similar to tennis, I clicked on sports, and the data set I ended up using was this Red Bee sports listing package free trial. And the reason I did this, well, one, it's free relative to the full price listing, which is $500. But if you were to take this information, use it for advertising purposes, which is kind of the main concept and purpose of me using this data set, then it would be worth purchasing the full set of information. But for the class, I chose this free trial, subscribe to it. But then once you have all the information, we can see the type of data that's available. We want to then take this data and put it into an S3 bucket. So what I did was we went to Amazon S3, create a bucket like we have in class before, choose the region, give it a name. For mine, I have DL Project 1. You can adjust the settings. I made mine public just so I would have a little bit of an easier time accessing it. But anyways, we'll go to my buckets. And from here, we need to get to a point where the information is actually uploaded. So we need to go back to AWS. We click active subscriptions, which here we can see the data that I picked. You want to click here, and then we want to auto export the job destination to the S3 bucket that we have. So here is my DL project 1. So if we went ahead and clicked this and add the destination, that's how we found it here within my data set. And so from there, it's actually very useful. I'll show you later on the steps, but it creates between AWS and Glue, we're able to see a full stream of how our information will be transferred between the services. So instead of using one of the Athena or Lambda, where we have to create our own kind of visual of where we want our information to go, it automatically does it when we use Glue. So first, what we need to do is we need to go to AWS Glue DataBrew. And from here, we're going to connect a new data set. As we can see here, I've already included it, but if we wanted to, we go to data set, we write in the name. You click the source bucket that we're using. So for this one, it would have been DL Project 1, and here we can see our information. However, if you look on the left-hand column, we can get our information, we can upload it manually. You can use Redshift, a data catalog, etc. So once we do that, we can go into our data sets. And from here, we can see, apologize, the data preview. So here we can see the titles, the episode title, season number, release date. And then if we click on the data profile overview, it automatically gave us a summary showing us the amount of rows, columns, how many of the cells are valid with actual information, duplicate rows, which luckily here we don't have many, only 1% shows the correlations between all of the variables. So then this kind of helps us when we get to the next step, we can transform our data and find the ones that are actually useful and ones that are worth exploring when we get to QuickSight. It also gives us value distribution, as well as a summary of each of the columns that we're going to be looking at. So if we go and click here, it automatically shows us how many of them are sports, how many are paid, etc. So this is really great, but for us to actually use it, we want to create a project. So to do that, we click project, give it a name. And had we already had a data set with specific transformations within it, then we could, and we felt that those transformations would be useful for this data set, we can take a recipe or those transformations, click it, and it will automatically put those ones into our data set. But because this is a brand new project, we're just going to start from fresh. This one has my data set, but if we wanted to, we would go to new data set, give it a name, upload it, and then we can move on. So from our project, if we click on it, it brings us to this amazing dashboard that I found a lot easier to use than the Lambda. We don't have to type in really any code to do these transformations. As you're doing each step, you will be able to highlight the column that you're looking at and then make the adjustment. So I'll show how we do it once the session's initialized, but over on here, we can see part of the recipe or the transformations that I've already done. So I deleted columns that were missing a lot of data, didn't have a strong correlation, or were just a bit unnecessary. I took the language column and I made it into a binary, numbers, English or Spanish. And then you can also like take your categories, map them to specific numbers. So sometimes it's easier to, if you're looking for correlations, you're looking for certain trends, it's easier to put them into a numerical value. But as we can see here, you can look at the columns, format it, clean, extract information. You can look at the missing data, fill it with a custom value, empty value, etc. If we had more data that we wanted to use, we could click another data set, join them together, and then apply transformations. It's really useful when you have multiple sets that overlap. We can test our data. We can create new columns. But either way, it's a very effective source. And here we go. It's finally loaded. So let's say I want to take the title, look at it. There's various recommendations that can be used. We can see how often a specific title appears on TV, how many times it's being viewed, the percentage of the values. And even then you can filter it as you're searching. So if you're looking for something specific, it makes it really easy. Anyways, from here, we want to take this and create a job. And this is how we will actually get our data set back into a new S3 bucket. But so when we click start job, we create the job and give it a name. We can either pick the project that we had already made, we can pick the data set, whichever one, they're both going to be the same. And then we can output it. So I chose in my example to make it into a JSON file because that was one of the formats that AWS QuickSight seemed to accept the best. And then you can create an S3 location. I had already created a new bucket, Project Laterno, for where I want that information to go. But if you wanted, you'd probably have to go back into S3 to create the bucket that you want it to go into. So once the job is run, we can click here. We can see it was succeeded. It succeeded. This is the graph that I was showing or alluding to earlier about how it automatically creates the data flow, and we can see exactly where everything's going. So instead of having to manually do it, it automatically creates this data lineage. But we'll look at the output. It's in our S3 Project Laterno. And then when we click it, for us to use it in QuickSight, we need to copy the object URL. And when we get into Amazon QuickSight, we can click, we'll get to this kind of dashboard area, and it shows all of the different services that we can take information from and then upload it into QuickSight. So one way to do this is we can either download the object that we had just made, download it to our server, and then use it that way. But what I did is I went to S3, I took that URL that we copied, put it in, gave it a name. Unfortunately, there were a couple issues with doing this. We have to go back and adjust the permissions for the S3 bucket. So if we go to the permissions, I had adjusted this just to make it easier. And right now we can see that there really isn't any information in this bucket, but thankfully the bucket that we are using for the incoming data from AWS Glue has it. So we have our bucket policy here, but we needed to adjust the access control list so that QuickSight would have access to the S3 bucket, because while it is still AWS, it is on a kind of a separate service. And then because of all of the commands within QuickSight, you have to have kind of similar commands and methods to SQL, which is, or SQL, like get, put, post, delete, head. So I added the into my cores section, and luckily there were a lot of resources to show you what you needed to add into this area to make it work. So anyways, once I have the data set loaded in, it will bring me to this screen where right now I obviously have the visuals that I've already created based on the information. But if I want to go and add a new visual, there's this option to autograph, which will pick the best sort of graph based on the columns that you select. So for example, if we decided to take episode title, and it will count the records of episode title, and we will say based on language. It lets us scroll, it lets us hover over, and we'll get information about that specific title. And then if we really want to edit it, we can click, go to the properties. So if I go into this one, I can edit the x-axis. So this is one of the ones that I wanted to look at. It was the viewership first, the airtime, air date time, and the genre of content that is being shown. So rather than having a title or an x-axis that has these underscores, I cleaned it up. And for this example, we can see that throughout the daily time slot for television, based on we can see middle of the day with all of these times, there's a lot of home shopping, some sports, and some null results, which I'm sure it's just the amount of information based on the free trial. And then we can see as the day goes on, there's a lot more sports, and it gives us an idea of maybe the population that's watching, what kind of ads we'd want to target to based on the network. But regardless of that, we can play around with all of the formatting of our data. We can keep adding to it. We could click the serve graph, which for this data makes 0 sense, but it lets you experiment and find something that will really show the information you want in a good way and make a compelling case if you were going to marketing, etc. And then the second one I made was just a matter of, based on language, I separated it out, looked at each different network, and it will kind of give you an idea of which ones are being viewed more. So you can see the type of content over here, the times, and then also see across networks which ones get the most action. So this is just like an easy overview of how to connect these services together, how to visualize data. And again, I think this is a really effective, quick way to do it without having to code. You don't have to be an amazing coder to do any of these things. It lets you transform the data in a really efficient way and be able to present it, because there's no point in having good data if you aren't able to express it out to the general public. Thank you so much.